Right now at 4, the Target 12 investigators with new details today following last night's report on questions about how schools are spending nearly $400 million in federal COVID cash.
Yeah, we're joined now by Target 12 investigator Tolly Taylor. And Tolly, you discovered there was no way for Rhode Island parents to see how much their school districts have spent.
Hi, Kayla and Brian. Yeah, that's right. So we know that every district in the state had their federal money by the end of last year. So we wanted to know how they're actually spending it. Each district's plan is available on the Rhode Island Department of Education's website, but you have to know where to look. This is a sped up video of all the steps you have to take to actually find those plans. But those plans still don't tell us how much has actually been spent.
Tolly, as you were telling us, it turns out you had asked, individual districts about how they have spent the money so far. 10 of them specifically you reached out to.
Yeah, and I was actually really surprised by this, but here's what I learned. Let's start with North Providence schools. They got about $6.3 million in federal funding, and they say they've spent 2.5% of those dollars so far. Coventry received roughly $5.4 million. They've spent a third of that money so far. Cumberland got $5 million, and they're the only district I contacted that spent all of it. Woonsocket got almost $29 million. They've spent less than 1% of that money. East Providence received $11.8 million. 6.5% of that has been spent so far. And Cranston got more than $20 million. They say they've spent 3.5% so far. Pawtucket schools had previously failed to answer our questions about how much they've spent so far. After our report aired, they wrote on Facebook that of the more than $31 million they received, they've spent a little more than 8% of that money.
And Tolly, not every school district answered your questions.
Yeah, so 3 school districts did not respond directly. Johnston responded with their plan for spending the money, which I already had and which is publicly available, but they didn't give any information about how much has been spent or what they've spent it on. South Kingstown responded with pages and pages of documents, but no clear information about how much was spent or anything like that. I followed up twice to get clarification and got no response. And finally, Warwick shared a document with me showing the district intended to spend 44% of its federal funding this past year, but when I followed up to confirm that it had in fact been spent, I was told that could not be verified. In all, these three districts received roughly $21 million in American Rescue Plan Act funding.
Certainly the importance of following the money if families want to know where it is and where it's going.
Exactly.
Remember, you can see Tolly's full report on these 10 school districts right now on WPRI.com. Tolly Taylor, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.